The human stood in the middle of the grand alien hall, feeling every pair of eyes locked on him. The marble-like floor reflected the light from the glowing crystal chandeliers above, and the banners of the Zareth Empire hung proudly from the walls. Guards in silver armor lined the sides, their weapons angled toward the floor but ready to rise at a second's notice. The air was thick with the weight of ceremony and suspicion. Captain Elias Kane was here on invitation, though it didn't feel like it. He had been chosen to represent humanity in this rare diplomatic gathering between Earth and the Zareth Empire, one of the most powerful alien nations in the galaxy. The Council had insisted that a warrior be sent, someone with a proven record, and Kane's name had been put forward. What he didn't expect was the princess herself to be present. She entered the hall with a grace that made the entire assembly fall silent. Princess Erilyn was beautiful in an otherworldly way, tall, slender, with eyes that shimmered like liquid silver. Her hair was a cascade of pale blue silk, and her gown seemed to be woven from starlight. But it wasn't just her appearance that drew attention. It was the way she carried herself, as if the universe itself bent to her will. Her gaze swept the hall and stopped on Kane. For a moment, their eyes met. She tilted her head slightly, as if evaluating him. Then, in a voice that carried to every corner of the room, she spoke in perfect standard. "So this is the human you brought me?" The court whispered among themselves. Kane stood straighter, unsure how to respond. She walked closer, her silver eyes narrowing. "I don't see the appeal," she said softly, but loud enough for the room to hear. "Not my type." The words hit harder than they should have, but Kane didn't let it show. He had been insulted before, by enemies, by rivals, even by his own commanders. But something about the way she dismissed him so easily lit a spark inside him. He wanted to prove her wrong, though he didn't yet know why. The introductions ended, and the council began their endless speeches about treaties and trade routes. Kane kept his attention on the princess, who barely looked at him again. She laughed softly at something her aide whispered to her, and Kane caught fragments of their conversation, mostly about him, and not in a flattering way. Still, he said, nothing. Later, during the feast, Kane found himself seated far from her. Alien delicacies filled the long table. Steaming plates of spiced root beasts, crystal cups filled with glowing nectar, and platters of jewel-like fruits that sparkled. Under the light, he ate sparingly, his mind elsewhere. He could feel her eyes on him occasionally, as if checking to see if he belonged here at all. The night might have ended there, with nothing but silent tension between them, if not for the sudden alarm. The hall's lights flickered, and a deep rumble shook the floor. Guards leapt into action, forming protective lines around the council members. A voice crackled through the comms. "Breach in the south wing. Unknown hostiles." Before Kane could react, the heavy doors on the far side of the hall burst open. Figures in dark armor stormed in, weapons blazing. The guards engaged immediately, but the attackers moved with terrifying precision. Kane's instincts kicked in. He vaulted over the table, pulling his sidearm from its holster. Through the chaos, he saw the princess. Her guards had formed a shield around her, but one of the attackers had broken through, aiming a plasma blade straight for her heart. Without thinking, Kane sprinted forward, his boots slipping slightly on the polished floor. He reached her just as the blade came down, grabbing a fallen guard's energy shield. Kane intercepted the strike, the impact jolting his arm. The attacker snarled, twisting the blade, but Kane pushed forward, slamming his shoulder into the enemy and sending them crashing into a pillar. The sound of shattering stone filled the air. Another hostile rushed in, but Kane swung the shield like a weapon, knocking them off their feet. A third attacker tried to flank him, but he caught their wrist and yanked hard, sending the plasma blade skittering across the floor. The princess's guards, now regrouped, moved in to finish the job. Kane turned back to her. She was staring at him, her silver eyes wide, not with fear, but with something else. For a brief second, the noise and chaos faded, and they just looked at each other. "You," she said quietly, her voice almost lost in the battle around them. "You saved me." Kane gave a short nod. Guess I'm your type now, he said, a faint smirk on his face. Her lips curved into the smallest of smiles before her expression hardened again. We'll see, she replied. The guards escorted her away, but she kept glancing back at him. Kane knew something had shifted between them, but whether it was respect, curiosity, or something more, he couldn't tell yet. One thing was certain. This was only the beginning. The next morning, Kane woke to the sound of distant horns echoing through the alien city. Sunlight poured through the crystalline windows of his guest quarters, scattering rainbows across the walls. It should have been peaceful, but his mind was still on last night's attack. He had replayed every move, every sound, every expression on the princess's face. He dressed quickly, his military jacket feeling heavier than usual. As he stepped into the hallway, 2 armored Zareth guards were waiting. They didn't speak, only gestured for him to follow. Kane's instincts told him this wasn't an ordinary summons. They led him through winding corridors, past murals depicting ancient Zareth victories, and into a private chamber guarded by twice the usual number of sentries. Inside, the room was quiet, lit by a soft blue glow from floating orbs. At the center stood Princess Erilyn, her gown replaced by sleek battle attire, silver plates over dark fabric, a blade at her hip. "Kane," she said, her voice calm but firm, "we need to talk." He raised an eyebrow. "About last night?" She nodded. The attackers were not random assassins. They were members of the Black Fang, a faction that wants to end the alliance before it begins. Kane crossed his arms. "You think they'll try again?" Her gaze sharpened. "I know they will. And my council. They believe you're the reason I'm still alive." Kane smirked slightly. "So I am your type now." She ignored the comment, stepping closer. "The council has ordered me to keep you close until this threat is gone. That means you'll be my personal guard for the next 7 days. Kane tilted, his head. 7 days? That's a long time for someone who doesn't like me. Her lips twitched in the faintest hint of annoyance. "It's not about liking you, human. It's about surviving." The deal was made without further argument. Within the hour, Kane was walking beside her through the city streets. The alien capital was a place of beauty and danger, towering spires of glass and stone, streets lined with merchants selling glowing fabrics and strange fruits, and patrol ships drifting silently overhead. The people bowed to the princess as she passed, but their eyes often flicked to Kane with curiosity or suspicion. "You're making them nervous," she said without looking at him. "Not my fault I'm hard to ignore," Kane replied. Her gaze slid to him briefly, almost like she was studying him again. "Humans are different," she said slowly. "I've read about your wars, your stubbornness. I thought it was arrogance. Now I'm not so sure." Before Kane could answer, a sudden commotion erupted near the marketplace. A vendor's cart exploded into a cloud of smoke, sending people screaming in every direction. Kane's hand went to his sidearm instantly, but he didn't draw it. Too many civilians in the way. "Stay close," he told her. 2 figures emerged from the smoke, their armor painted with the jagged fang symbol. One carried a short plasma rifle, the other a curved blade. Kane stepped forward, putting himself between the princess and the attackers. The rifleman fired first. Kane grabbed a fallen market shield, the blast splashing harmlessly against it. He shoved forward, closing the distance, and slammed the shield into the rifleman's chest, knocking them into a fruit stall. The second attacker came from the side, blade slicing toward Kane's ribs. He twisted, letting the edge scrape harmlessly across his armor, then countered with a solid punch to the gut, but the fight wasn't over. A third figure appeared on the rooftops above, this one holding a small metal sphere. Kane's stomach dropped. An explosive. He didn't think, he just acted. In one motion, he grabbed the princess by the waist, pulling her into cover as the grenade went off. The shockwave rattled the ground and shards of glass rained from nearby windows. When the dust cleared, Kane stood, still shielding her with his body. Her silver eyes met his again, and this time there was no doubt. There was gratitude there. And maybe something more. You're reckless, she said softly. Reckless keeps you alive, Kane replied. The city guard arrived moments later, hauling away the attackers. Kane stayed close as they returned to the palace, the streets buzzing with rumors of the second attempt on the princess's life. That night, in the safety of her private chambers, she looked at him for a long moment before speaking. You're not like I expected, she admitted. Kane smirked. Starting to think I might be your type? Her lips curved into a faint smile, but her eyes were serious. If you keep this up, human, you might be. And for the first time, Kane wondered if this assignment would end with more than just a treaty. By the third day, the palace felt more like a trap than a safe haven. The Black Fang had already proven they could strike in the heart of the city, and Kane knew hiding behind walls only made them easier targets. But convincing the council to let the princess leave was another matter entirely. They'll never approve it, Erilyn told him over breakfast, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup. The council fears what's out there. They should fear what's already in here, Kane replied. If we keep waiting, they'll attack again. Out there, we can choose the ground. Her eyes met his, weighing the risk. Finally, she set her cup down. If we do this, we do it my way. 2 hours later, they rode out in a convoy of armored hovercrafts. The city's spires faded into the distance, replaced by wide plains of silver grass that shimmered under the twin suns. Kane rode in the lead vehicle beside Erilyn, scanning the horizon. She wore a lighter version of her battle armor, the silver plates gleaming in the sunlight. This is the first time you've left the palace in months, isn't it? Kane asked. Her gaze stayed forward. Since my father's death. Assassins took him outside the city. The council swore it would never happen again. Kane glanced at her. And yet here we are. Her lips curved in a small, humorless smile. Here we are. They traveled for hours, stopping near a rocky ridge overlooking a narrow valley. It was the perfect choke point, exactly the kind of place Kane wanted to control if trouble came. The soldiers began setting up camp while Kane and Erilyn stood at the edge, watching the wind ripple through the alien grass. You think they'll follow us? She asked quietly. I'm counting on it, Kane said. That night, the twin moons rose, casting silver light across the valley. The air grew colder, and the campfires burned low. Kane stayed awake, leaning against a boulder, his rifle across his lap. He could hear the faint hum of the guards' patrol drones and the distant rustle of the grass. Erilyn approached, her armor replaced by a long cloak. You don't sleep? She asked. Not when someone's trying to kill you, Kane replied. She hesitated, then sat beside him. You're different from the soldiers I've known. You watch everything. You don't just trust walls or weapons. Kane glanced at her. Where I'm from, trust gets you killed. Her silver eyes softened. And yet, I think I'm starting to trust you. Before Kane could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the valley, a sound too precise to be nature. He was on his feet, instantly scanning the ridgeline. Shadows moved against the moonlight. Contact, he said into his comm. The attack came fast. Black Fang soldiers poured down the slope, their dark armor blending with the night. Plasma bolts streaked through the camp, striking tents and equipment. Kane fired back, each shot deliberate, forcing the enemy to slow. Stay behind me, he shouted to Erilyn, but she was no helpless royal. She drew her blade, its edge glowing faintly, and took a defensive stance. 2 attackers charged her. Kane dropped one with a shot, and she cut down the other with a swift strike. The sight made him reassess her completely. The fight raged for minutes that felt like hours. Kane moved through the chaos with precision, covering Erilyn whenever she was exposed. At one point, he caught sight of movement near the supply crates, one of the Black Fang planting an explosive. Without thinking, he sprinted toward them. He tackled the attacker, slamming them into the dirt. But before he could finish the fight, a blast of pain shot through his side, a plasma bolt grazing his ribs. He rolled, gritting his teeth, and fired a single shot that dropped his attacker. Erilyn was suddenly there, grabbing his arm and pulling him to cover. You're hit, she said, her voice tight. It's nothing. Kane grunted, though the burn seared through him. She tore a strip from her cloak and pressed it to the wound. You saved me twice now, she said, not looking at him. He met her gaze, and I'm not done yet. By the time the last of the Black Fang retreated into the darkness, the camp was a mess. Burned tents, scattered supplies, and wounded soldiers. But they had survived. Kane sat by the fire, the pain in his side dulling under the makeshift bandage. Erilyn sat across from him, her eyes on the flames. You were right, she said quietly. Out here we could fight on our own terms. Kane gave a faint smile. Starting to see the value in having me around? Her lips curved in a small, reluctant smile. Maybe. But the way she looked at him before turning back to the fire told Kane more than her words did. Something was changing between them, and it wasn't just about survival anymore. The morning after the battle in the valley, the air was heavy with the smell of burnt metal and scorched earth. Soldiers worked to rebuild the camp, but Kane's instincts told him something was wrong. The Black Fang had found them too quickly, too easily. Someone had told them where to strike. He walked the perimeter, scanning every face. Most soldiers avoided his eyes, bowing slightly as he passed, but one or two looked away too quickly. He filed the reactions in his mind. Erilyn joined him, her hair tied back, her silver eyes sharp. You're looking for the leak, she said quietly. Kane nodded. The Black Fang didn't stumble on us by accident. One of your people is feeding them information. Her jaw tightened. You're accusing my guard? I'm saying someone in your guard wants you dead, Kane replied. And until we find out who, you're not safe. That afternoon, Kane tested a theory. He told the soldiers they would break camp at dusk and move east toward the Crystal Dunes. But in reality, he planned to move west, deeper into the rocky canyons. If the Black Fang appeared in the east, they would know someone had warned them. As the sun set, they quietly packed up and moved west. The night was silent except for the hum of the hovercraft engines. For a moment, Kane thought maybe he was wrong, until the comm crackled with a warning. Contact. East Side Patrol engaged with heavy fire. Kane's grip tightened on the controls. That was it. Proof. He turned to Erilyn. We have a traitor. But before they could act, a blast rocked the lead vehicle. One of the rear craft exploded in a fireball, forcing the convoy to scatter. In the chaos, Kane saw movement, a soldier dragging Erilyn toward the shadows. Kane jumped from the moving vehicle, hitting the ground hard, and sprinted after them. The soldier shoved Erilyn toward a waiting skimmer. Kane tackled him before he could climb aboard. The two crashed into the dirt, trading blows. Kane caught a glimpse of the man's face. It was Commander Veyron, the one Erilyn had trusted since childhood. Why? Kane demanded, his forearm pressing against Veyron's throat. Veyron's eyes were cold. The Princess's alliance will destroy our people. The Black Fang will save us. Kane didn't hesitate. He slammed the hilt of his knife against Veyron's helmet, knocking him out. Erilyn was at his side in an instant, her breathing fast. You were right, she said, her voice unsteady. It was someone I trusted. Kane glanced at the horizon. More Black Fang skimmers were approaching, their lights cutting through the dark. We can't go back to the camp. They'll swarm it. Where then? She asked. He pointed toward the jagged peaks to the north. We go there. Fewer places for them to surround us. They mounted the stolen skimmer and sped away, the engines roaring as the wind tore at their faces. The terrain grew rough, forcing Kane to weave between boulders and narrow ridges. Behind them, the faint lights of pursuit grew smaller but didn't vanish. Hours later, they stopped in a narrow canyon hidden from the main paths. The skimmer's engine ticked as it cooled, the only sound in the still night. Kane scanned the shadows before motioning Erilyn inside a small cave. She sank to the ground, exhaustion showing in her eyes. We're alone now, she said. No guards, no council, just us. Kane leaned against the wall, keeping his rifle close. Better that way, less chance of another knife in the back. For a while they sat in silence, the cold seeping into their bones. Then Erilyn spoke again, her voice softer. You've saved me 3 times now, and each time I've seen something human. Something I can't ignore. Kane met her gaze. Starting to like your new type? A small smile played on her lips. Maybe I'm beginning to understand it. Before he could respond, the faint echo of engines reached them. The Black Fang were still hunting. Kane rose, checking his rifle. Get some rest, he said. We move before dawn. She didn't argue, but her eyes followed him as he kept watch at the cave's entrance. And for the first time, Kane felt the line between protector and something more begin to blur. The first light of dawn spilled across the canyon walls, painting the rock in shades of gold and crimson. Kane was already awake, scanning the ridges for movement. The night had been too quiet, and he knew the Black Fang would not give up so easily. Erilyn stirred, pulling her cloak tighter around her shoulders. Did you sleep at all? She asked. Kane shook his head. Not while we're being hunted. She stood beside him, her silver eyes taking in the jagged peaks ahead. If they find us here, we won't have anywhere to run. Then we don't. Let them find us, Kane said. We keep moving, stay unpredictable. They left the cave before the sun was fully up, climbing narrow trails that wound higher into the mountains. The air grew thin and cold, and loose stones rattled under their boots. Kane kept his rifle ready, his senses on high alert. Erilyn followed closely, her hand never far from the hilt of her blade. Hours passed before Kane spotted it, glints of metal far below, moving in the same direction. They're tracking us, he said. 5 skimmers, maybe more hidden. Erilyn's jaw tightened. We can't outrun them forever. Kane scanned the terrain. The trail ahead led to a cliff overlooking a deep gorge. We make our stand. There, he said. They'll have to come at us from one direction. By the time they reached the cliff, the sound of engines echoed through the valley. Kane set up behind a cluster of rocks, checking his ammo. Erilyn took position beside him without being told. You could stay behind me, Kane said, half joking. I think you've learned by now. I don't hide, she replied. The first, Black Fang riders appeared, their armor dark against the morning light. Plasma bolts lit the air as they closed in. Kane fired controlled bursts, dropping 2 riders before they could get close. Erilyn moved like liquid silver, deflecting incoming fire with her blade and striking down anyone who reached the rocks. One attacker vaulted onto the ledge, swinging a serrated axe. Kane barely had time to block with his rifle. The force knocked him backward and the weapon skittered out of reach. The attacker raised the axe for a killing blow. A flash of silver intercepted it. Erilyn's blade cut clean through the axe handle, and in the same motion, she drove the hilt into the attacker's chest, sending him tumbling over the cliff. Kane grabbed his rifle again, breathing hard. You're getting better at this, he said. I've had a good teacher, she replied, her tone almost teasing. The fight dragged on. More Black Fang came, using grappling lines to scale the cliffside. Kane switched to close combat, smashing one enemy's helmet with the butt of his rifle, then turning to shoot another at point-blank range. Erilyn fought beside him like she had trained for this her whole life, swift, precise, and unyielding. Then Kane saw it, one of the skimmers below, fitted with a heavy plasma cannon. It powered up, the barrel glowing with deadly light. Down! Kane shouted, pulling Erilyn behind the rocks just as a beam of searing energy blasted the cliff, showering them with molten stone. We can't stay here, she yelled over the noise. Kane's mind raced. He spotted a narrow ledge to the right, hidden from below. Follow me! They sprinted along the cliff edge as another blast tore through the rocks behind them. Kane leapt to the ledge first, then reached back for Erilyn. She grabbed his hand, and he pulled her across just before the path behind them collapsed in a rain of stone. They crouched there, breathing hard, hidden from sight. The sounds of battle faded as the Black Fang regrouped, unsure where they had gone. That was close, Erilyn said, her voice steady despite the danger. Kane looked at her, a hint of admiration in his eyes. You're more than I expected, Princess. Her silver gaze met his. And you're more than I wanted to admit. For a moment, the cold wind and the echoes of war faded, leaving only the two of them on that ledge. But the moment didn't last. The hum of approaching engines reminded them that the hunt wasn't over. "We keep moving," Kane said. She nodded, and together they slipped deeper into the mountains, side by side, not as protector and protected, but as fighters bound by survival. By nightfall, the mountains gave way to strange, broken shapes on the horizon. Kane slowed, studying them through the fading light. Stone towers leaned at odd angles, half buried in the earth. Crumbled walls stretched into the shadows like the ribs of a dead giant. Erilyn stepped beside him. "The ruins of Kethar," she said quietly. "Older than my people, older than almost anything in the galaxy." Kane eyed the jagged silhouettes. "Good place to hide?" She hesitated. "Good place to get trapped." They pressed on, weaving between the skeletal remains of buildings. The air was colder here, and the wind made a hollow whispering sound as it passed through broken arches. Faded carvings covered the stone, alien script that neither of them could read. Kane kept his rifle ready. They found shelter in what had once been a great hall. Half the roof was gone, letting moonlight spill across the cracked floor. Kane started a small fire in the corner, its glow pushing back the darkness. "Why here?" he asked. Erilyn's gaze lingered on the carvings. "Because the Black Fang fear this place. They think it's cursed." Kane smirked faintly. "I'm starting to like curses." But as they rested, Kane noticed something in her expression, something she hadn't shown before. It wasn't just weariness. It was weight. "You're holding something back," he said. She looked at him for a long moment, as if deciding whether to speak. "You've saved my life more times than I can count. I think you deserve the truth." Kane stayed silent, letting her continue. "My father wasn't just killed by assassins," she said slowly. "He was betrayed. The Black Fang didn't act alone. They had help from within the royal line." Kane frowned. "Family?" Her voice was tight. "My cousin. He wants the throne. If the alliance with Earth is destroyed, the council will rally to him. That's why the Black Fang keep coming after me." Kane pieced it together quickly. "If you die before the treaty is signed, he wins." She nodded. "And now you understand why they won't stop. Even if we survive the Black Fang, I'll still be hunted in my own palace." Before Kane could respond, a low hum filled the air. He was on his feet instantly, scanning the shadows outside. Shapes moved between the ruins, too many to count. "They found us," he said. The first plasma bolt slammed into the wall, spraying stone dust. Kane grabbed Erilyn's arm and pulled her toward the far side of the hall. The Black Fang were closing in from all directions. "Only one way out," Kane said, pointing to a narrow archway at the back. They sprinted through twisting corridors, the sound of boots and weapons fire echoing behind them. Twice Kane turned and fired, dropping pursuers before they could close the gap. But the enemy kept coming. At last they reached an open courtyard. In the center stood a strange structure, half machine, half stone, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Erilyn stopped, her eyes wide. "This is..." She shook her head. "It's the heart of Kethar. My father spoke of it in legends. It's said to protect those who carry royal blood." Kane glanced back. Shadows were spilling into the courtyard. "We don't have time for legends." Erilyn stepped forward, placing her hand on the device. A sudden pulse of light spread across the courtyard, forcing the Black Fang to shield their eyes. Kane felt a pressure in the air, like the ground itself was holding its breath. Then the light faded, and the enemy charged again. Kane pulled Erilyn behind a low wall. "We can't hold them here." Her jaw tightened. "You run, I'll stay." "Not happening," Kane said, grabbing her arm. "If you stay, you die. I'm not letting that happen." She looked at him, her silver eyes shining in the moonlight. "If they take me, it's over for my people. For yours. You have to choose, Kane. Protect yourself and maybe escape. Or stay and fight with me until the end." He didn't hesitate. "I made my choice the first time I saved you." They rose together side by side as the Black Fang closed in from all sides. Kane's rifle barked fire, Erilyn's blade flashed silver, and for a moment, it felt like they could hold the line. Forever. But the enemy kept coming, wave after wave. Kane knew they couldn't win here, but if they could break through the smallest gap, there might be a chance to escape into the deeper ruins. "On my signal," he told her. "We run." She nodded once, gripping his arm briefly before letting go. The next moment, Kane hurled a plasma grenade into the largest cluster of enemies. The blast tore through the courtyard, and in the chaos they broke for the shadows, running together into the heart of the ruins, toward whatever came next. The deeper they went into the ruins, the darker it became. The moonlight could not reach the narrow passages, and the sound of pursuit echoed through the ancient halls. Kane led the way, his rifle up, every step calculated. Erilyn stayed close, her blade ready. They emerged into a vast chamber, the ceiling lost in shadow. Massive stone pillars surrounded them, and in the center stood a raised platform carved with strange symbols. Kane moved forward cautiously. "Looks like a dead end," he said. Erilyn shook her head. "Not a dead end. A place of challenge. My father told me of this. Here, disputes of honor are settled, to the death." Before Kane could reply, the Black Fang poured into the chamber, their leader stepping forward. He was taller than the rest, his armor black with crimson markings, his helmet shaped like the fanged maw of a beast. In his hand was a long spear, crackling with energy. Erilyn's breath caught. "That's Koresh, my cousin's champion." Koresh's voice was deep and cold. "By the law of Kethar, I challenge you, princess. You and your human may both fall today." Kane stepped forward, but Erilyn put a hand on his chest. "This is my fight." He looked into her eyes, then shook his head. "Not alone." The champion laughed. "Then both of you will die together." The fight began without warning. Koresh moved like a shadow, his spear slicing the air. Kane dodged, firing short bursts, but the champion's armor deflected most of the shots. Erilyn darted in, her blade flashing, forcing Koresh to split his focus. Kane caught the shaft of the spear as it thrust toward Erilyn's chest, the energy burning his hands through his gloves. He twisted hard, wrenching the weapon aside. Erilyn seized the opening, slashing across the champion's side. The armor sparked, and Koresh staggered back, but he was far from finished. With a roar, he spun the spear in a deadly arc, knocking Kane's rifle away. Kane barely ducked the follow-up strike, feeling the heat pass inches from his face. They fought as one, Kane taking the hits, Erilyn striking when Koresh was off balance. Each clash of metal echoed like thunder in the chamber. Sweat ran down Kane's back, and every breath felt heavier. Finally, Koresh overreached, thrusting too far. Kane caught the spear and yanked him forward. Erilyn stepped in, driving her blade into the gap under his arm. Koresh froze, then collapsed to his knees, his weapon clattering to the floor. The remaining Black Fang hesitated. Kane stepped forward, picking up the fallen spear, its crackling light casting harsh shadows. "Next?" he asked coldly. The enemy slowly backed away, dragging their champion's body with them. Within moments, the chamber was empty, the echoes fading into silence. Kane dropped the spear and leaned against a pillar, breathing hard. Erilyn approached, her silver eyes fixed on him. "You didn't have to fight with me," she said softly. Kane met her gaze. "I told you. I made my choice the first time I saved you." She stepped closer, her expression shifting from the proud princess to something more open, more human. "When I first met you, I said you weren't my type. I was wrong." Kane gave a faint smile. "Glad to hear it." Her hand brushed his cheek, her voice barely above a whisper. "You are my type. You're everything I didn't know I needed." For a moment, the ruins felt silent, timeless, as she leaned in and pressed her forehead to his. Kane's arm came around her, steady and certain. Outside, the night was quiet. The Black Fang had fled, their leader defeated, and for the first time in days there was no sound of pursuit. As they began the long walk back to the capital side by side, Erilyn glanced at him. "When we return, the council will want to give you honors, titles, maybe even land." Kane shrugged. "I didn't Do it for them. Her smile was soft but certain. I know. And as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Kane realized that somewhere between the first insult and the last battle, the princess had gone from someone he had to protect to someone he would never let go.